Accutron Watches present. From New York City, this is the Accutron Show, a time travel through American culture with your hosts, Bill McCuddy, Scott Alexander, and David Graver. Visit AccutronWatch.com and discover the brand that has made American history with an all-new proprietary next-generation electrostatic energy movement. Accutron. It's not a timepiece, it's a conversation piece.
I do want to have a powerful impact on the world. I want to make things better. That's all I really care about is really leaving a legacy of inspiration.
The person you heard at the top of the show was today's guest, Indrani. She's an award-winning director, photographer, and social justice advocate. But first, me, Bill McCuddy, along with culture writer Scott Alexander and editor David Graver. I still have to read it off the page.
That's good.
We're talking about the power of art to change the world, and this woman can actually do it. She walks the walk all over the planet. All that and more in this episode of The Accutron Show. Stay tuned.
This podcast is presented by Accutron Watches. Visit our website, accutronwatch.com, and discover our iconic Space View 2020 collection, recreating the stunning visual impact of the original open dial design combined with an all-new electrostatic energy movement. Time just changed again. The Accutron Space View 2020.
I almost feel like we're not worthy today with our guest.
It's tough.
I feel so inadequate when I read the bio of Indrani and the
I usually work with David Bowie or Beyonce. But today,
Lady Gaga.
or Mother Theresa.
Right.
One of those. Or Mariah Carey.
When
One
she
of
was
those.
2 or 3 or 4, she was out with Mother Teresa, like just cruising, I guess, just looking for people who needed help.
Out for a good time on a
I
Saturday
imagine
night.
that did instill in her a sense of the need for change, the ability to help other people globally, because a lot of social justice advocacy exists in her work today, in addition to her celebrity work.
If you don't know who we're talking about, it'll sound like we're making all this up. I mean, she's a photographer, she's a filmmaker,
It's a model.
has done modeling, has opened her several charitable foundations all over the world, including her home of India, where she is originally from, but went to Princeton, goes back and lectures there.
Right. Lectures at college.
We should just get up and give her the show. We should just
maybe
leave
this
the
is the Indrani
podcast
show
room
now. Yeah.
and let her do all the heavy lifting. I want to hear about the influence she had, or the influence that David Bowie and Iman had on her.
Yeah.
She has great stories to tell about working with Beyonce.
Well, it feels like she's kind of part of a new breed, I hope, of people who find a way to do their truly creative work. And she works with brands, she works with artists, and then she works with charities. And so she really doesn't see these divisions, it seems like, across these types of work. And
David,
so being effective in the world that way, it's like, wow, she's getting a lot done.
It seems like she brings like Pepsi, L'Oreal to
The present day.
to real and gets them to contribute to some of these. And so, is she an artist first? Is she an advocate first? How do the two live together? Does the photographer ever start shooting what the filmmaker would prefer to be doing? She's done music videos with Mariah Carey, with Beyonce we talked about, and she's represented at the National Portrait Gallery.
First woman of color in the Smithsonian's permanent collection.
And that's
amazing.
the Beyonce shot.
I'm actually really curious. I mean, we all have album art that we remember that is just as important to us as the songs on the album. And as someone who's done a David Bowie album cover, a Beyonce album cover, I wonder what it's like to go through that creative process.
Well, not just any Beyonce album cover. That's the first record, right?
Yeah.
The movie should be about
But
her.
to go from that and not to say, okay, what's the next rock star I can work with?
Right.
Or what's the next, it's like, no, okay, I'm going back to India to like help starving children.
Yes.
It's amazing.
She's also got a concert event kind of thing happening in the fall in Los Angeles. We will hear all about that. And we're going to get the lowdown on how someone can do so many things so effectively. I'm curious to know whether she thinks enough celebrities walk the walk. You know, there's so many stars that say, oh, I'm in this charity and I do that for that thing. I wonder if that annoys her. I want to know that.
Celebrities and artists as well, because we do have a responsibility, people that identify as artists and people that are celebrities, to try and elicit social change, and she's actually doing it, which is rare. I feel like it's rare, but maybe there's value to putting your name on something, knowing that more eyeballs will see it because it's celebrity endorsed.
Well, that's what they tell us. That's what the celebrities would argue as they're opening their giant gift bag.
I like that you drew that line between artists and celebrities.
I mean,
over here you have the artists.
Venn diagram.
There's obviously some.
Venn
Well, you
diagram.
talk about David Bowie and you talk about Lady Gaga or Beyonce, and you're definitely in that realm where this person is famous for a reason. This is not someone who is, you're annoyed. You're like, why is that person famous? Like, they like, okay, no, the talent is just flying out of them in a very obvious way.
Wait, I left out the United Nations. She's also working with them.
Just
so.
That's just the United Nations.
She must be, and I want to ask her about this, very excited that we are planning trips now to other planets because she will go there and raise money for them.
Right.
She's exhausted planet Earth. She's headed there.
She's done all the good there is to do.
She's done a lot of good, but in the meantime, she's with the good for nothing. Here, David, Scott, and I on The Accutron Show right after this.
This podcast is presented by Accutron Watches. Visit our website, accutronwatch.com, and discover our Accutron DNA collection. Reimagined for a new generation, the Accutron DNA combines breakthrough technology, precise engineering, and modern aesthetics to achieve a new level of technical excellence. The Accutron DNA, the new face of time for those who blaze new trails.
Indrani, welcome to this little thing we call the Accutron Show, and we try to weed out the guests that haven't done very much in their lives, and I don't know how you snuck through. We've spent the first 10 minutes of this show, and we only got through like half of your resume. So I guess the first question is, when did you know you wanted to be an advocate versus an artist?
Well, I've always been drawn to both. But from a very, very young age, literally as young as I could, as old as I needed to be to walk, I spent time with Mother Theresa, with my parents volunteering with her. And so I got to see the power that even a very small person could have, you know, brightening the day of someone who's dying, or, you know, spending time at the orphanage with other kids that really lacked that human connection.
That's like starting with Michael Jordan if you want to play hoops on the weekends. I mean, where do you go with your advocacy after Mother Teresa? It sort of explains how this life of yours has turned out, or is turning out. But then where is the artist? What's the first time you said, I'm picking up a camera and I want to shoot something, video or still?
I started photography when I was about 6 or 7 in India as well. And really it was the process of becoming an immigrant that instilled the value of images for me, because I left behind everyone that I loved, everyone that I knew, and I didn't think I'd ever see them again. So those images took on this huge value for me. I spent so many hours staring at every detail of the people that I loved and missed. And then it was just a small step from that to wanting to record my world, and perhaps it was a fear of losing those whom I loved that got me into creating portraits.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you discovered the power of art to change people's perspectives and to open people's eyes?
Well, I really enjoyed art as a young person. As an Indian, you know, I was kind of excluded from the pop culture. My parents were very traditional in many ways, and we spent a lot of time in museums and art galleries. And so I wanted to engage with the world. And so that was what drove me to want to be a photographer and a filmmaker. And the stories, you know, that was really what excited me, was also those stories that I carried with me that my family brought from India that kept me connected and made me think about the mythologies that we were creating, and how does those stories change when you're in a different world? And that was part of the process for me.
And what about what's going on in India now in terms of, I mean, you must have seen poverty when you were there, devastation. It's a joyous country in many ways, and yet it's also besieged by one thing after another, including now, or most recently, the COVID outbreak.
Yes, absolutely. So I went back to India as soon as I could as a teenager, and I started a school there, a foundation for women and children, which
Out of your house, right?
out of my house. That's right, and with my father. I wanted to start it on my own, and then I realized just how challenging it was. So I got him to come out of retirement in Canada, and he helped, and then took all the difficult part, which is running the operations on the ground. So that's been my connection to the world of the opposite side of the world, the place where people are so much in need, and I do everything I can. But with COVID, it's just been tremendously difficult, and so I'm actually working on a big fundraiser and doing an exhibition and a musical series, a multimedia series.
And that's through the Shakti Empowerment Education Foundation?
That's right. That's the foundation that we co-founded and that I've been executive director for all these years.
It seems to me that there's this, I don't know if it's a tension, but I'm wondering if you can shed some light on this, that these operations that do so much good in the world, they are operations. Like, I don't know how big Mother Teresa's operation was. Like, how many people? She had hundreds of people, or?
Her operation started very small and it grew very large. So it depends on
it becomes it becomes a job in itself.
Absolutely.
To just manage not even the doing good part, which is significant, but then making sure that people are in the right place. It organizes them like that seems like a huge challenge.
Absolutely. And running a foundation is very complicated. I've been very fortunate having my father and having people around us that he's grown up with, so people that we know that we can trust. But it is a very complex thing to do, and we've had a lot of resistance from local politicians and local land mafias that have tried to create problems. So it's not a straightforward process. But I have to say, the rewards are incredible. It's been the best thing I've ever done, and it's where my greatest joy is, seeing these children and the women whose lives can be transformed so quickly. Given just literacy training, vocational training, and microfinancing, just a few dollars can transform a life.
Is it still way, way, way difficult to be a woman in India?
It is. It is. It's very challenging, especially for people who are of the lowest economic levels. It is a very, very difficult world.
What about applying that to the world of film? Is it challenging to be a woman in film today?
It is, absolutely. The numbers haven't really shifted since the 60s. It's less than 10% of directors are women of films. And same, I think, in the photography industry, in the art world. Museums around the world show 90% white male art. So it's not very different. In
Sorry, every white guy sitting with you. We apologize.
Well, I have nothing against white men. In fact, I think they do wonderful things. But I do think that it's important that we get to see through other lenses. And I think everyone has so much to learn and to enjoy as well from those varied perspectives.
But one of your mentors was David Bowie. Which I find fascinating. How did you meet him, and how did he bring you into the fold?
It was really quite a surprise for me because I started doing my photography very young, at 15 years old. And then by the time I was 19 or 20 in college, I was
in this country. You're here now.
Yes. I went to Princeton, and I published some of my early works in some cool underground London magazines. And they were crazy works. So I was experimenting with post-production, putting people on other planets, nudes of women with very crazy colors, turning them into aliens and things like that. And we got a call at the studio one day, and it was David Bowie, and he...
That's me, looking at your work.
We thought it was a joke. It turned out that he was the creative director for Iman's book, I Am Iman, which was her career retrospective. And they had shot the cover with two of the top photographers of the time, and rejected both of them. And
Who shall be named in this podcast, or who shall not be named? All right.
I won't name names, but it was an extraordinary opportunity because they decided they wanted someone new, and they'd seen the work in this underground magazine, and let's give it a try. So a lot of pressure on that shoot, and David Bowie was there, and we had a wonderful time talking about the meaning of life and all kinds of wonderful stuff, and we did a really extraordinary shoot. And he said at the end of it, he said, I'm working on an album, and so maybe I'll give you a call when it's done. Maybe we can do the cover for it. Great.
And you're still in college, and you're getting this call.
Yes.
And did he talk about what they didn't like about the Richard Avedon photograph?
It wasn't Richard Avedon.
Did they mention why Herb Ritts wasn't really the right guy for it?
That they wanted something new, and she had been seen the same way for quite a while, and this book was very experimental. They had multiple narratives, which is something that I find really exciting myself, and I like to explore as well in my work.
And then this began a relationship with Iman and David Bowie that went until his passing. And
That's right. He launched my photography career with the cover of his album Heathen, and then my directing career as well with a music video called Valentine's Day, which is about a high school mass shooter. So a very dark but fascinating subject.
This is so intriguing to me, the idea of synthesizing art forms. You have been tasked with building visual language for audio art. Can you tell me your process in creating a definitive album cover, knowing that it's got to encapsulate several moods throughout an album?
Well, it's a really exciting process crossing through different art forms. And I think that there's so much that relates to the way you feel in an image that is very similar to music, but obviously it's a very different space. So for me, I begin with a deep exploration into the character of the person, not necessarily their work, because that often is their past, but I'm really interested in where they're going. And so I love to talk to my subjects. I don't like to think of them as subjects, really, because that's objectifying, but ultimately we have to put a lens on them. But I love to connect, and for me, it's about finding that divine spark. What makes them unique? What they feel is their purpose in being in this planet.
Do you have systems in place to overcome obstacles in collaboration? You're clearly working with egos. Artists are egos, and creatives have opinions.
Well, a lot of artists work from a place of ego, and there's this fighting of egos. My ego is bigger than yours. You're going to do what I tell you. And that's not how I operate. I like to let the person be fully themselves. So even in a scripted project where they have to become a different character entirely, it's always the most exciting when they're connecting on a deep level with something true about who they actually are. And I think helping people to find pieces of others in themselves and those relationships is really exciting.
But David's right. A Beyonce is only going to give you 10 minutes, let's say, right? I mean, they can be on very limited time schedule.
Some of them. With Beyonce, I had unlimited amounts of time. It was a really exciting process because she was still figuring out who she was going to be. So that was really...
So no diva behavior, no...
She was delightful and actually ended up wearing a pair of jeans from a man because we were playing with the outfits and saying, well, what if we did this? And what if we made it just more like how you really are instead of this diva outfit? And that ultimately became the image that we chose.
It's so interesting that sort of the biggest stars, these talents that are not because they're big stars, but because they're immense talents, Beyonce, David Bowie, these people where they're so assured in their talent, they're so assured in their gift that they're able to sink into that moment and sort of search and be vulnerable.
Yes, I think that's the most important part of any artist's journey is letting go and allowing themselves to find something true and something deeper than they've ever experienced before. Those are the moments of transcendence. And you see that on the screen. You feel it. It's just like when I'm talking to you and I realize something and you see that spark of connection, that's something that transcends
What in God's name would you realize looking at him?
When you talk about divine spark, it seems like there's this thread of the sacred that sort of runs through so much of your life, your work, and all these other things. Can you talk a little bit about, there seems to be many different sort of avenues of this. Mother Teresa's one. I think your stepfather was a Rastafarian.
That's right.
There's, and then David Bowie, very existential and very sort of humanist in his viewpoint. Any thoughts on that kind of common thread?
Yes, it is a very important thread for me. And I'm a Clubhouse creator first, and I have a room called Sacred Realms. So,
Okay.
So it is I think that the sacred is what inspires artists. It inspires all of us in some way, whatever we want to call it. But I think there is something beyond our everyday experience that art allows you to connect with. And I do believe that each of us has some greater purpose than just the physical things that we're able to do in our lives. So that's what I'm always trying to find, and it's not an easy journey. But for me personally,
Well, you're looking everywhere. You're doing everything. You're leaving no stone unturned in this search.
That's true. Well, I grew up in India, and my parents raised me with every religion. They made a big effort to take me to the church, to each temple, to the mosque, and to try to understand through different eyes that journey. So that was a great blessing for me. And I personally have pursued a path of meditation and of Vedanta, which is the core of Hinduism, which allows for all paths to be correct and valid ways of gaining wisdom.
We have a path too. It's going to a break right now. But when we return, we're going to hear about Beyonce and working with her. And let's see if she'll dish any dirt about, I doubt it. We couldn't get that photographer's name out of her. But Indrani joins us after this.
This podcast is presented by Accutron Watches. Visit our website, accutronwatch.com, and discover our legacy collection, reviving some of the most memorable Accutron watches from the 60s and 70s. The Legacy Collection combines timeless design with the technical excellence of Swiss watchmaking, each limited to 600 individually numbered pieces. The Accutron Legacy Collection, inspired by the past, built for the future.
Welcome back. We're talking to Indrani, a woman who has done seemingly everything. What isn't on the list? Is there one thing you haven't done that you still want to do?
I want to be Prime Minister of India.
Really? Okay. You're launching that campaign right here?
No, right. I had a vision. No, I do want to have a powerful impact on the world. I want to make things better. That's all I really care about is really leaving a legacy of inspiration.
As a storyteller across so many different types of media, do you feel a responsibility to change the world, to use your voice as a means to elicit change?
What a great question. I do. I feel that as an artist, one has tremendous power to influence. And I feel that if one doesn't use that for making the world better, then you're contributing to the problems. And I think we rarely talk about responsibility in our culture, but I think that that's a huge one. And artists, filmmakers, and those who support them, the investors, the corporate clients, the luxury brands who have the resources to help, really should.
You mentioned luxury brands, so I would love to talk about your work with United Nations. Actually, what brought you to work with United Nations? And then can you tell us a little bit about how fashion factored in?
The ultimate luxury brand.
United Nations, the ultimate luxury brand.
It really is. I wanted to, I worked with a lot of different nonprofits. So I started my own one, but then I worked with many other much bigger ones all around the world, in Africa and India and here. And I felt the need to bring people together because there are so many wonderful people working in their own little silos and wanting to find those economies of scale that, in the commercial world, brands, they aggregate resources. And I wanted to do that with people for social justice. And so the UN seemed the logical place to do that. And I found all kinds of wonderful people there, worked on many different projects. One of them was the World Fashion Forum, which I helped to organize. And it was my very first event at the UN that I had an important role in. And I was so excited by the potential of bringing together luxury brands around some of the issues that really they could do much better with, such as the labor chain issues of slavery and living wages, and of course pollution issues. That fashion is one of the largest polluters in the world, and I was disappointed that we weren't able to take those ideas further and really create the allegiances that are needed to make these things happen.
And real inroads you felt like were made? Because I feel like the UN is just another political body of people that will smile and nod and go, we'd love to make a difference, but then did anything happen?
Well, it's a wonderful place for conversations. And so there were really tremendous conversations. And I'm sure that over time, those will have an effect. But I'd like to see that accelerated if possible.
It seems like you've used storytelling in a lot of sort of interesting ways, whether that's through still photography or filmmaking and other things. And I saw that you have lectured on the topic of, I'm just going to read it so I get it right, counter-colonizing heteropatriarchal gaze.
That's right.
Using storytelling.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely.
G-A-Z-E, correct?
Yes.
Well, no, I just want to
it's a good question.
be clear.
The male gaze.
Yeah, okay.
Wade.
Yes, I think that the heteropatriarchal gaze has been so normalized in our culture that men, women of all ethnicities are used to seeing the world and themselves through a very narrow lens. And I'm all about broadening that, allowing for other perspectives to help us to gain perspective. You can't have perspective when you see through one eye only. So having women storytellers is essential, having women with experiences of different cultures, the immigrant stories, the LGBTQ stories. These are essential not just because of the idea of representation and fairness, but in order for us to grow as a species, we need to be in touch with the ways that the world is from other points of view. And I think each of us can find great joy as well as wisdom from those other points of view.
And it seems like story as a medium, telling someone something is one thing. You should have a different perspective because this and this and this are true, but story seems to have a unique sort of power to convince or change minds.
Absolutely. I believe that filmmakers and artists are the myth makers of our times. It used to be the writers who had that role, and before that it was the oral traditions, the singers. And of course, many different art forms cross over. But particularly the world of film and television has an enormous impact. So I've been fortunate to be a visiting lecturer at Princeton talking about these issues, and I'm excited to explore them more deeply.
In your exploration and your immersion of these deep subjects that are often painful, domestic abuse, poverty, pollution, how do you maintain optimism as a maker?
That's a great question. I was working on a project on trafficking of children, which has got to be one of the hardest to deal with. And I spent time interviewing young people who had been through the most appalling losses of humanity that one could experience. And the thing that really struck me was that coming out of such a dark place, they were able to find joy again. And if they can do it, then for me as a storyteller, it's my responsibility to help bring that joy into their world. So I think a lot of people try to stay away from things that make them uncomfortable. And really, there's so much that we can do by engaging, but engaging respectfully. And a lot of filmmakers don't necessarily understand that part of the responsibility, that probing questions and getting someone to cry on camera may win you an Oscar, but it's not necessarily going to be good for that person. So.
Well, now wait a minute. If you're feeling like you could tear up now, it wouldn't be a bad thing for our promo. I teased about Beyonce. We'll get that in a second. But you clearly walk the walk. There's no question about it. And I wonder if it annoys you to see so many other celebrities and filmmakers and photographers or whoever they are that kind of pretend to. That have their name at the top of a letterhead when somebody's trying to raise some money. And yeah, maybe that can do some good. But there are a whole lot of people out there who show up at a red carpet, get their picture taken, and then just leave immediately. How annoying is that?
I don't find it annoying at all. I think every little bit that someone can do is something wonderful, and that sometimes all it takes is that celebrity to show up and shake someone's hand for 5 minutes, and then they might donate $1 million. So that might be more worthwhile than years of going door to door collecting, So I think that each of us are blessed with different abilities, different powers, if you will. Celebrities have the power to influence. And so I have great respect for those who give even a minute of their time, because it can have a huge impact.
There's a lot of Mother Teresa in you. There really is. You're very kind to a lot of people. Let's talk about Beyonce, because I assume she didn't see some work in a London Underground newspaper. How did you come to work with her?
Well, I actually worked with her when she was part of Destiny's Child initially. And then, again, a very similar story. She was doing her solo debut album cover and had shot it with two of the top photographers of the time, and both were rejected. One of them poured fake blood all over her without her planning, or honey, I can't remember, some kind of
Now, why would
substance.
Dave LaChapelle do something like that?
In any case, I was very fortunate to get to explore with her who she might become, and that was really a transformative shoot for both her and myself. And one thing that people don't realize, and I didn't realize actually until a few years later when I had her picture up on a wall next to a statue, is just how much my childhood influenced that image, because there's an image of the Shiva, the dancing Nataraj, which is very similar to that pose. And it just happened spontaneously. She was dancing and we were capturing all kinds of different movements. But that moment where she absolutely lined up with this statue that is beloved by millions of people in the world, of the god of dance.
Who haven't you worked with that you'd like to?
Oh, there's lots of people. I'm really interested in politicians. There are many of those who would be fun to shoot. But yeah.
Well, as Prime Minister of India, everyone will take your phone call.
He would be interesting. Absolutely.
You worked with analog photography, I assume, when you started out, and then you made the transition to digital. How was that transition for you, and do you feel like there's differences between those media?
I transitioned very early on. I was experimenting with some of the very first ways of capturing medium format.
Pixels about this big?
Yeah. It was really exciting because there were so many more possibilities opened up with the digital world. And then in the film world, I faced the same thing, where people are still holding on to the old film ways and then switching over to digital. For me, I love the transformative power of digital. My work is all about transformation. So for me, that being able to go in and tweak things much more is very exciting.
Actors love more than 8-minute loads too, where they can have like a chance to go on, and let's do another, and let's do another, and let's do another.
And that's how I do my photography and my filmmaking. I like to let the flow happen. I think that I try to minimize myself as much as possible and let them just be.
Hey, speaking of letting go, we can't let you go without talking about some of the film projects you have coming up. What are you working on?
Yes, I'm working on some beautiful stories. A story of Bessie Coleman, who was the first African-American and Indigenous female pilot in the 1920s. And she transcended such terrible challenges of not being able to learn to fly as both a woman and a Black person. And she saved up, got friends all around her, became the best manicurist ever, because that's the only job she could get. But it was a way to connect with people, and went to France and returned as a pilot, showing people that a woman of color can do anything.
How did Amelia Earhart get all the press?
She was after her. So
she was?
Yeah, Bessie Coleman was before Amelia Earhart.
Oh, and do we know who's going to play Bessie Coleman?
Well, that's all under wraps at the moment. Okay. We'll let you know. But Halle Berry is going to play her mom.
Oh,
congratulations!
Wow, congratulations!
That's exciting.
Yeah.
What's the next thing that's coming up that you're working on?
So it's going to be in LA.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's in LA.
So yes,
and not Louisiana,
no,
Los Angeles.
Los Angeles,
yeah, okay.
Yes.
And so who's going to be involved with that, and what's that called?
Well, it's going to be called Shakti LA, and it's a fundraiser for Shakti Empowerment Education Foundation, and we will have some wonderful artists it'll be a surprise, but we'll let people know as we get closer to the dates. We're hoping to have some of the wonderful people that I've worked with come and share some more of their perspective.
Well, everyone must answer your phone call, because you've worked with some of the most amazing people, and now us. So thank you very much for joining us on the Accutron show.
Thank you. It's been such a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for listening to The Accutron Show. To listen to all of our shows, visit accutronwatch.com. To learn more about the world of Accutron, follow us on Instagram at AccutronWatch and subscribe to our podcast. From New York City, until next time, Accutron time.